Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm discussing Inside Out 2, written by Meg LeFauve and Dave Holstein and directed by Kelsey Mann. This was such a highly anticipated sequel, and thankfully for me personally, and for the box office as it seems, it has greatly surpassed those high expectations. It has since gone on to be one of the highest grossing animated movies of all time, $1.4 billion in the box office. That's incredible. So that's just amazing. And I had been excited for an Inside Out sequel really since the first Inside Out movie back in 2015 because they set up a sequel so well. And I actually haven't seen the first Inside Out movie since 2020 when I talked about it on this podcast. That was back when I still did the episode numbers. I remember that was episode 99, as a matter of fact. So, oh gosh. You can go back and listen to that one if you're interested, because I do have a little Inside Out story that I wrote called An Emotional First Date. So, won't retread that. But, that was a lot of fun. And this is still one of my all-time favorite Pixar movies to this day. So I had high expectations for this movie, and for me personally, just like the first movie, it made me laugh, it made me cry, it made me reflect. It was beautiful. I absolutely loved it. That said, it was interesting because two different people asked me if I liked this movie more than the first one. And it's been about a month now since I've seen it, and what I said then, what I still feel now is I honestly like them both equally. I wouldn't say one is better than the other, because this movie does a wonderful job, in my opinion, of expanding the universe within Riley's head, of course, and, obviously with the new emotions, but like the new things in her mind with the sense of self and the belief system. That's all really fascinating. The sarcasm, I think that was amazing. Evidently, early on, they had plans to do a procrastination land, and the joke was that they'll get around to it, they just keep procrastinating on it. So just cool things, expanding, taking ideas in your head and how you personify them. Another cool thing was the brainstorm and literal storm. So really cool stuff like that. That said, though, the reason I feel it's so equal is because, honestly, as I was watching it and, still, again, reflecting on it now, the structure of this movie plays out the same as the first movie, especially with Joy's journey. Even she has, the point where she cries again and, the point where she realizes that she's unintentionally hurting Riley when she thinks she's helping her. Because in the first one, she thinks preventing sadness as much as possible. That's what's going to help Riley. And then in the first movie, she realizes the value of sadness, the emotion in our lives, and for Riley specifically. And so then just seeing the growth of Joy, where now she and Sadness are good friends. And even toward the beginning, when Riley has to have a moment to herself when she just kind of tears up, and then Joy just says, "It's okay, we need this." I loved that. And she takes Sadness to the sense of the belief system and plucking them like harp strings, and it's just so beautiful. I'm a good person, all these things that we tell ourselves, so it's so lovely. And so I purposely actually didn't watch any trailers for this movie. I only saw the teaser trailer. But I did see some marketing, promotional things in terms of some cast interviews. So obviously I was well aware that, okay, we're going to be learning about, she's going to be getting these new emotions, with anxiety being the main one, and then envy, ennui, and embarrassment. And so anxiety really as the antagonist in this movie, it's so well done. And so I listened to some interviews even with Meg LeFauve, because she has a podcast called The Screenwriting Life with Meg LeFauve and Lorian McKenna. They have guests and everything. They did an interview with the director of this movie, Kelsey Mann. And what he said was that a valuable thing for him going into the development of this movie, I believe when he spoke with the first director, who has since gone on to, he moved up in terms of his role at Pixar, but the first director was Pete Docter. So speaking with him, he said that a valuable piece of information for him was treating the movie as an original. So not being obviously honoring the first movie, but being approaching it okay, it's a brand new movie. Where are we going to take these characters? What's the point of these new characters? How are we expanding this world? So I think they did that really well. And so what Meg LeFauve said, because she also wrote for the first movie, so that makes me happy too, like when it's like similar people in the creative team, because then obviously she knows the characters well. So again, expanding them more. So I think that's all wonderful. But what she said was, in the first movie, if it's about Joy learning when to take a step back, in this movie, it's Joy knowing when it's time to step forward again. And I thought, oh, that's beautiful. Because to me, what sums up the movie, this is just jumping ahead now, obviously spoilers. I feel like I never have to say that when, again, I assume like when you listen to these episodes that you've seen whatever it is I'm talking about, seen or read, whatever it may be. But what like truly struck me as like the underlying theme, the true message, the true essence of this movie and comparing it to the first movie. When in the first movie, Joy says to Sadness, Riley needs you right now. And then in the sequel, when Sadness says to Joy, Joy, Riley wants you right now. Getting emotional just thinking of it. That to me sums it up. Because obviously her whole arc, Riley, now she's 13, so like the whole puberty button gets smashed and destroyed, and then like the demo workers come in and we get the new emotion first being anxiety. And apparently early on they had an idea where anxiety would show up as like disguised as something else, and then like she reveals herself as anxiety, but they said it just like they had to like simplify it more. They also had an idea where like early designs of the character where it was kind of like this little monster thing, and then it grows more and more, like running from it or trying to fight anxiety, but then like when you learn to face it head on, that's when like it shrinks again. So again, all these really cool concepts, how they personify these emotions, because like then you got embarrassment being like this big pink, like, you know, obviously shameful, doesn't talk much until like the end, and he just has like that outburst like yeah, and then just immediately embarrassed again. Or ennui, which of course is French for boredom, which is like, you know, a typical teenager just like on her phone, so to speak, but obviously that's how she controls the console. And then of course you got envy, who really, like, even envy, like this wide-eyed, like, you know, because envy is synonymous with admiration, like pointing you to what you want. And so I think that's really wonderful too. And she's voiced by Ayo Edebiri, who is amazing in The Bear. And I know she has a bunch of other amazing projects too. She's also a writer, so she's phenomenal performer and actress and writer, you know, storyteller, Ayo Edebiri. And then Maya Hawke voices anxiety. And obviously Amy Poehler again as Joy, and Phyllis Smith again as Sadness, and Lewis Black as Anger. And then obviously they recast, because of like, it was like all whatever disputes with contract, they recast Fear and Disgust. But they did a wonderful job. But I will say though, just real quick, like with Fear, like even though to me, like he doesn't sound like Bill Hader, but like Tony Hale, he does a great job, like his own version, his own interpretation of Fear. And then the actress who replaced Mindy Kaling is Liza Lapira. She plays Disgust. I thought she was like kind of seamlessly Disgust. And apparently what she did was there were times where she would do takes like looking at her hair. And she said that would kind of change the delivery of the lines for her at times. So then Kelsey Mann would notice that, and then he'd be, okay, now do a take where you're like, you know, a hair take or whatever they called it. So then she like would like look at her hair, like playing with her split ends, whatever, and then like this would be like more of a throwaway, because obviously the character of Disgust leans more into sarcasm territory as well. So again, like expanding the characters, I think is fantastic. Even like with Anger too, like I like how, you know, they expand the characters in terms of, obviously with Joy, for example, in the first movie, like she is joyful, of course, but like she has a breaking point where she cries. So in this movie as well. So, you know, I think that's obviously like, it doesn't make them one note. Like, yes, they are the emotions that they are, like, you know, they're guiding Riley. Those are their specific emotions, but they're like fully realized characters. And so it's great how then like when the new emotions take over, and then the old emotions are literally bottled up, you know, like again, just creatively showing these things in our head. I just get a kick out of it. It's beautiful. I think it's just amazing too how then with anxiety, because Meg LeFauve herself has said this, that for her, like what she would tell herself sometimes is like literally what's done in the movie, like toward the end then, when it's like, anxiety, I know you're trying to protect me, but you can take a seat now, and like I've got this. So that's just a beautiful way in and of itself to kind of manage our own anxiety like that we experience in our daily lives, because obviously that's a big struggle for a lot of people, myself included. And something that I personally have found, it's something I talked about actually with my therapist, in fact, and I'm proud of myself now because like it applies to this too. Like, this was before I saw the movie, but now like in reflecting on it, I'm like, this applies to that. Like what Joy says when anxiety, like that part when anxiety is using Riley's imagination against her and like having them all pull up different scenarios of what could go wrong when she, of course, she's going to try out for the hockey team, and then Joy has to tell her none of those things are happening right now. Like, you got to focus on the now. Because similarly with fear and anxiety, you got fear who is like obviously fearful of actual threats, whereas anxiety, it's perceived threats. It's like the lies we tell ourselves, the things that we get worked up about in our heads. And so, also for me though, like when I get, say, social anxiety and like I'm playing out things in my head like, oh, well, this could go wrong, whatever it may be, I tell myself then, well, logically speaking, only one thing is going to play out, one series of events. So it's like a matter of like you can acknowledge anxiety, like what Meg LeFauve herself has said, like I acknowledge you, but now you can have a seat. So again, like at the end of this movie when anxiety is going to take over and then she says, no, none of those things are happening right now. You can have your seat here. And then like anxiety has that moment where, oh, well, we have a Spanish test. Oh, there you go. Like that's helpful. So, because like obviously anxiety, like it's just so well portrayed of just like doing a million things at once, of, convincing herself. That's so heartbreaking too. With building that, like she thinks she's protecting Riley, but then in doing so, it's like doing too much at once. So again, this is just all so well done in terms of how kids can understand this. And like I said this when I talked about Inside Out. I know for a fact I said this, that it's a rare movie I wish I could have seen when I was younger because I know it would have helped me. And this movie too. But like, obviously this helps me as an adult too because we all have, varying various levels of anxiety. Some people worse than others, sadly. But, obviously there's medication, there's, therapy, breathing techniques. To simplify it, it's mostly just like you got to focus on the now, whether it's like taking a step back, deep breathing, mindfulness techniques, or like techniques where, if, like, say for a panic attack, you got to focus on, okay, what are 5 things I can see, 4 things I can hear. Like there's like techniques like that, 3 things I can smell, taste, touch, things like that. Grounding techniques in that sense. There's things like, journaling, of course. There's all these ways to handle it, obviously. What's not helpful is like keeping it all in. So again, it's like acknowledging it, but then moving on from it. It's just like, okay, maybe I'm feeling anxious, but you know what? I'm also feeling excited. I'm also feeling like, there's always other emotions too. So like even like for a first date example, oh, I'm so nervous, I'm anxious. What if he doesn't like me? It's like, well, I'm just going to get to know this person. Like it's like just kind of like basically changing your perception. These are things I have to remind myself as well because I've struggled with that too. But so for Riley then, and Riley also, she had a new voice actress. She was in this movie, voice actress is Kensington Tallman. And what was beautiful too to me, again, like listening to some of these interviews, is that what Kelsey Mann, the director, again, he said that they had consultants for this movie, like they called them, I believe, Riley's crew, because like they're in the credits of the movie. It just made me happy seeing that. And so it was a group of teenage girls, like around Riley's age, maybe some a little younger, some a little older. And so they consulted them, like getting their notes to help with the authenticity of this movie, of like things that they went through at that age to help kind of really make it true to their experiences. So I think that's amazing too. And so when Riley, like when anxiety accidentally, basically, like unintentionally gives Riley this messed up sense of self, where first Joy like has this sense of self for Riley of, I'm a good person, which of course is a beautiful thing. But then when anxiety takes over, then it becomes, I'm not good enough. And that broke my heart. Oh my God, that broke my heart. And it's just so devastating. And then like anxiety pushing her with all of her actions, thinking if I don't make this team, I need to be the best, otherwise I won't have friends. Like all like these lies we tell ourselves. And it's just so relatable, sadly, but you learn from it, of course, like reflecting on it, like my 13-year-old self. My 13-year-old self, like I'm really connected honestly with my 13-year-old self because that was when I started regularly, like I had kept a journal here and there when I was younger, but at 13 I kept a journal consistently every single night that year. So I remember writing in my journal and like things I loved as a 13-year-old, and that things I still love to this day, like from when I was 13. One of them being, for example, South Park, Fruits Basket, like certain, shows, movie, Mean Girls, Shrek 2. Honestly, it was a big year for like amazing things that year from when I was 13. But for me, like it's funny because again with this movie they considered many other emotions. I believe one of them they considered was surprise. Again, like in the first movie, another one was guilt. They considered shame. They considered like other emotions. For me, a big emotion as a 13-year-old was excitement. And like I would say actually, I remember I would write this a lot. I called it hyper. I was hyper a lot. So in a way, like, just being super excited about stuff. Danny Phantom was another thing. I'm just like remembering now. Also, Green Day's American Idiot came out. It just looks it was amazing stuff that year when I was 13. But anyway, so seeing Riley and like the things she's going through. And obviously there were like really funny moments in this movie. Like when she's trying to be cool and then like ennui's like my entire life has been building up to this moment, and then just like, oh, I mean, yeah, they're cool. Like, the sarcasm when those girls kind of like were about to tease her for still liking that pop band, whatever it was. And what's interesting is like thankfully those older girls weren't really such jerks. They so could have been. They so could have like I was afraid of that a little bit. Like they were gonna have a moment like where maybe Riley overhears them making fun of her, kind of. It was more so, again, it's more so built up in her head. It's like, oh, I gotta be with these cool girls because like me and my two friends now, we're gonna be going our separate ways. So now it's like I gotta be with these girls. This is my future, like with this hockey team, because this girl is so cool. And like she's copying her with the red streak in her hair. And so then poor Riley, when like she has that panic attack, and then it leads to just all those things she's telling herself, like, I'm a good person, but sometimes I mess up. And like I do well, but sometimes I fail, and sometimes I need help. And that's when that got me. That's when joy hugs the sense of self, and then all the other emotions hug. It's beautiful because again, what it reminds you of, and like with the beauty of these movies and just with art in general, like when you put so much of yourself into it, is that you're not alone in feeling this way. Like everyone feels like a weirdo sometimes. Everyone feels that they're not good enough at times. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to feel that way. Like you acknowledge it again, but then you know that you're more than that. So even like what's great about Joy's arc in particular with this movie is similarly how in the first movie she realizes the value of sadness, that in this movie she realizes that like, yes, she's a good person, but she's all these other things too. Sometimes she does fail. Like that's when like she sees like the memory she had like chucked to the back of Riley's mind. Like, oh wait, yeah, she had failed that test that one time. Like things like that. It's like that's like what makes you a true human being, that you're not perfect. You can't always win. You can't always, like, yes, you can always try your best, but then you learn from it and you grow from it. So Riley's arc I thought was wonderful in this movie, just like an older Riley as a young teenager now. And like, with some acne and like the braces, like just like the growth of Riley physically and then like obviously emotionally. I thought that was all great. And obviously like with Envy was great because again, it's just like, oh, I want this, like pointing you to what you want and like being all wide-eyed, like just like the actual embodiment, like the physicality of these characters. Anxiety with like the kind of like wiry, explosive hair, and then Embarrassment, this big pink, like, character, so cute. What's funny is like Embarrassment and Sadness, I low-key was like, oh, do I kind of ship these two? I think I do, because like she says twice, oh, hey, big guy. I was like, okay, Sadness, I get it. Oh, gosh, whatever, I don't know. Because weirdly what I'm seeing actually is like people kind of shipping, which I never considered this in the first movie, but in this movie I could kind of see it. People are shipping joy and anger. I'm like, I kind of see it, like a little bit, because, so for Anger, for example, when he's like, I can't always be the rage guy, like when like they're in that part with the imagination, it's like, oh, what if, they give Riley flowers, like trying to show her like good things that can happen, and then Joy's like, no, I like it. And then like the part when Anger kind of like, not like accuses Joy, but like trying to like have Joy see things from their perspective more so. And then like when he says, if Joy can't see that, she's delusional. And then Joy has the moment of delusional. Of course I'm delusional. Like you think, that whole kind of outburst. It's just funny, like seeing characters, again, like I've always said this, characters who are generally joyful, for example, in this case, moments when they have their breaking point, and like when she's sad, when she breaks down in this movie too, or characters are usually fearful, moments when they have bravery. And so like with sadness, then like when she's in headquarters again, and then like embarrassment sees her, and then she's like, shh, like, you gotta help me out, and then like he walks away, you think, oh no, he's gonna go tell them, but then instead, nope, he starts stacking up the manuals to help her out. So cute, so sweet. That's why like I'm like, oh, they're cute team. I love that. And similar with fear, kind of like idolizing anxiety. It's like, oh, I could tell you and me are going to be friends. Like, that's too funny. And then again, him having like this moment of bravery in a sense, like when he saves them all, like with his parachute. And then Joy's like, you have a parachute? Yeah, of course. You guys don't, too funny. And then obviously disgust. It's like when she has that moment with like Riley's first crush, like that, I guess it's supposed to be like an anime or a video game character. But so like disgust is so great in this movie. Again, like I liked seeing that they kind of all had their moments to shine. Because like a disgust scene, like, oh no, like there's that look, like, like from the friend early on. It's like, oh, like analyzing it, too funny. The other funny thing that just, speaking of shipping a little bit, it's so funny. Oh God, this is like, sometimes it's just so weird talking about this stuff, but whatever. It's part of like the joy of the, of the movie. So I don't know if you saw, like before seeing this movie, there was like an article, I guess. I don't know. I somehow saw this, like an article about who are considered, I guess it was hot dads in Pixar movies. And I believe, I don't remember now, I think number 2 was Mr. Incredible, but number 1 was none other than Riley's dad, and Mr. Anderson. I don't know if they have first names. I think his name is Bill, I want to say. Oh, it just says Mr. Anderson. Whatever. Riley's dad. And so I thought to myself, because I hadn't seen the first movie in years, since 2020, like I said, when I talked about it on this podcast. And I thought to myself, oh, really? He's considered hot? I mean, from what I remember, he seems kind of like, vanilla, a little boring. And then I was like, all right, I guess. And then it's so funny. So then watching this movie, and obviously the parents really aren't in this movie much because it's more so about Riley, navigating her life as a teenager. But so the part when they're in the car and then Riley's dad says, oh, we're gonna have the whole house to ourselves, what do you want to do? And like his eyebrows go up and down, and I was like, oh, you know what, all right, I can kind of see it, he is kind of hot, so I'll give you that, people, whoever like voted for him being number 1 hot Pixar dad. I was like, yeah, that sounds about right, actually, I can get on board. But then the mom's just like, oh, well, we can do some, like, basically just talking about chores, like, totally missing his, like, cue of, that's too funny, oh my gosh. But obviously the parents really aren't in this movie much because it's more so with Riley's life as a teenager again. And the part with her panic attack is just so heartbreaking and feels so real, too, because it's just, like, again, built up so much in her head of, if I don't make this team, I won't have friends, and just like adding fuel to the fire, like how you exacerbate things in your head. And like, yeah, it's important, like for her in this moment it's important, but like years from now, if she reflects back on it, she would think to herself like, oh God, why did I worry so much about that? Instead of just what then thankfully she does do, of just being in the moment, having fun, and just the joy of her love of hockey, playing. And so then like when sadness says, Joy, Riley wants you right now, it's just so beautiful. And then they're just all watching kind of in this beautiful moment of them all staring up together. It's like, yeah, we're all here in this moment playing hockey, doing what we love, because like it's so, I just love like just a small detail. I didn't mention this talking about it in the first movie, but I love how they say we. It's like, no, that's not ours, like in this movie, like just like, they are we, like they are all a part of Riley, like it's Riley's joy, Riley's sadness, of course. So even like in the broad sense of it, because this is something that Amy Poehler has said when talking about this movie, like in doing press interviews, she said that like in a broad sense it's a workplace comedy. And so that is true though, because yeah, it's like Joy is at the helm mostly, like she's the team leader, and then like you got each of the personalities, so it's too funny. And so again, like I just loved how each of the emotions, like the OG emotions, like how they were all together, like since they were like cast out of headquarters. And then what's great is that like the callbacks to the original movie, but as a purpose for the plots. Like, for instance, when Joy says, Sadness, you have to go up because you're the one who like knows the manuals front to back, and then like Sadness says something like, oh well, actually only in this one it's like she says some fact, and then she's like, oh, you're just proving my point right now. So it's just really great how, like, again, utilizing the first movie but then expanding it for this movie and like whatever serves the story. So there were just like, despite like the really truly heartbreaking touching moments, because like for me, like the moment that really got me, again, like the part when Riley says I'm not good enough, like sometimes I need help, that moment specifically, and then Joy hugs her sense of self and they all hug. That part made me tear up. What also really, really got me was the part when Anxiety like has her breaking point, because obviously Anxiety being the antagonist, because she's unintentionally hurting Riley thinking she's helping, and then like she even confesses saying, I'm sorry, Joy, I really thought I was protecting her. But the part when she's at the console and everyone's like, you gotta, like you're pushing her too hard, and then the part when it's like silent and like it's this whole chaotic mess of orange, and then the wiry orange, and then Joy steps through, and then Anxiety is just frozen there with tears in her eyes. That got me. I was like, this poor Anxiety, like she too is just like frozen. It's like she's done too much and she's stuck and they can't take back control. And then Joy says to her, Anxiety, you don't get to decide who Riley gets to be. I'm getting emotional now because that's so true. You don't get to decide. And just, it's so touching. It's so heartbreaking. And she says, you have to let her go. It's so true. It's like we have to remind ourselves of that sometimes. Like, no, you don't get to decide. Like, yes, it's okay to feel that. But again, like you acknowledge it and you move on from it. It doesn't have to dictate and take over your whole life. You don't let it stop you. And that said, though, there were some really great laugh out loud moments too. One of them, honestly, like truly one of the funniest moments that got the biggest laugh out of me and like in my theater was that whole character Bluefy, voiced by Ron Funches, is amazing. Like, the classic like preschool character breaking the fourth wall, like Blue's Clues, Dora the Explorer, classic preschool age stuff. But then him just talking to the audience like, well, what do you think we should do, whatever. And then like it cuts to him staring at the wall, like talking to the wall, literally. So he's got a little kooky, a little loopy in the brain, being stuck in the back of Riley's mind. It's so funny. And then just Anger being like, who are you talking to? And so again, even Anger, like him having this moment of like, because then like when he gets that pouchy thing, it's like, well, what are we gonna use? Like that can help out Anger too now. I like that, just seeing how these characters have expanded. Like, I just love that. Like, have grown, have matured, if you will, It's really lovely. I just think that's fantastic. Because even with Joy, another really heartbreaking moment is when Joy reaches her breaking point in this movie and she tears up and then she says, I don't know how to stop anxiety. And maybe that's just what happens when you get older. You stop feeling less joy. And that's just so devastating to think, because no, it's like, again, like this is all part of the human experience, all these emotions. So it's great that then they all come together to, continue to shape Riley as a human being, like, in all of the highs and lows of life, like, and just so, again, the beauty of wanting joy and like feeling joy. It's just lovely. I love that. So that's really, really sweet. And again, how, again, with Joy's arc being, because like first when she was like chucking all of those seemingly bad things about Riley into the back of her mind, it's like, oh, like when then like she's looking at the memories, like, oh wait, oh yeah, she had failed this test, like things like that. So again, it's like, yeah, she's bright and smart, but you know what, sometimes she does fail, and that's okay. Because as always, it's like you learn from the failures, you move on, you dust yourself off, you pick up and you keep going. And it's like, so yeah, maybe she wasn't ready to be on this hockey team yet, but you know what, then like she just let go of that expectation of the lie she told herself that I'm not good enough, and that like if I don't do this I won't have friends, and she just allowed herself to do it for the love of it, just play hockey because she loves it, and that's just so lovely, and like just be with her friends, and so that's really sweet. So I just love all that. And honestly, I like they talked about this too in press interviews that I saw, like teasing the possibility of an Inside Out 3, which I think could be so, so cool, because it would just be really amazing. Like similar with the Toy Story movies, like with Toy Story 3 anyway, to me, the best of my favorite of the franchise. I know there's going to be a Toy Story 5. I don't know. It's just so funny seeing on the internet because they're going to be released around the same time. Toy Story 5 and also Shrek 5. And it seems like everyone's super excited for Shrek 5, myself included. And people are kind of like not that excited about Toy Story 5, but I digress again. But I'm looking forward to both. But like just Shrek 5, I don't know, we'll see. Obviously, just real quick, because like I talked about Shrek and Shrek 2 on this podcast. I haven't talked about Shrek the Third and Shrek Forever After because, in my opinion, they just pale in comparison to the first two movies. And I haven't yet seen like any of the Puss in Boots movies. I may have to check those out because I love that character. But again, I digress. But we'll see. So I don't know. I'm sure Toy Story 5 will have its moments. Toy Story 4 was okay. I've talked about it on this podcast. It was good, but doesn't, it's not as good as the first three Toy Story movies. But what I'm getting at, again, there's always some tangents here and there. What I'm getting at, though, is that with Toy Story 3, we see Andy going off to college. So that could be similar with Riley, like a new phase in her life. Like maybe she graduates high school and like the emotions associated with that. Maybe like she has a boyfriend then or starting a job, like just the other things that they could explore. Obviously still keeping it like, universal for kids and for everyone to enjoy. But yeah, because obviously like, the beauty of this movie too is that like it's for everyone, but especially like, kids and their parents and stuff, because what was really sweet was sitting through watching the credits that I really loved. There's a little post-credit scene too, but what was really sweet was just seeing that the film, like at one point, like toward the end of the credits, it says dedicated to our kids. We love you just the way you are. So like a lot of parents who worked on this movie, and that's just so sweet and so reassuring because again, like it just goes back to like, yes, it's okay to fail sometimes. It's okay to, like don't be hard on yourself, but like learn from your mistakes, keep growing, just like not harping on things that get you down, not letting anxiety take over, like not letting any one emotion take over really. It's like you need all these emotions to be a thriving, healthy human, So again, like just seeing the growth of Riley and then like even like with the parents then again at the end, because obviously like it's a little bit of a cop-out in terms of it's like, well, why didn't they have these emotions in the first movie? Like, obviously they come, like, they're new in Riley's mind in this movie, but, like, with the adults. But then, like, they do, like, a little bit of the retconning with mom, for instance, like, with mom's emotions, then anxiety comes back, and then they're like, oh, welcome back, anxiety, So, yeah, just like, oh, that's all we get, just good, like, like the little sassy teenager remarks, because the sarcasm thing was just so good, because obviously that's a big part of, like, becoming a teenager, like, your sassy self and like trying to be cool, trying to fit in. So when she's like, oh yeah, like, like just with ennui in particular, but obviously with disgust too, to an extent. But like that sarcasm, that part was just so hilarious too. It's like, oh, it's great seeing you guys. Oh, it's great seeing you guys. I loved that. I was like, that's so clever, so amazing. So I just, again, like just seeing how they expanded this world. I love that. So here's hoping for a potential Inside Out 3. So I just know they're going to knock it out of the park because it's just, again, so much love and care put into it. You could just feel that. I feel that with this movie and like with the truly great, standout, extraordinary Pixar movies. Like, this being one of them in my opinion, like this, as in these two now, Inside Out and Inside Out 2. So I just truly loved it. It's hard to say even like a favorite character for me. I probably would say Joy though, because even like her growth as a character in this movie, again, because like, yes, she is Joy, but she has her breaking point too. And she has to learn and grow as well. She has to understand that like all these things are what would make Riley who she is. So it's just really sweet, and how they all come together to then help Riley, like in that hug. That just like it symbolizes it. That sums it up. It's just so lovely. And again, from the first movie being sadness, Riley needs you right now, to then joy, Riley wants you right now. That to me is the connecting themes of these two movies. I absolutely love it. It's just so sweet. So here's hoping for an Inside Out 3, and just cheers to all of the brilliant minds at Pixar. Absolutely phenomenal. I can't wait to watch this movie again and just pick up on new things. I don't know if I think there may have been like an Easter egg about like like, for Bing Bong. I'm not sure though, but like just even like little things like in the animation, like again, like I'm excited to rewatch because then I'll pick up on other things rewatching it that I missed the first time. But I just really loved it, like the whole part, like, with anxiety at the wheel. It's like, oh, what are we gonna do with her arms? Like it's just like being all goofy and weird trying to be cool, that's like classic. That's so relatable, like, oh gosh, in front of the quote unquote cool girls, but like, the older girls. That's just too funny, her trying to fit in like with the red streak in her hair. But then again, like just throwing away all his expectations and then just being there in the moment, playing hockey, doing the things she loves. So I loved that. So thank goodness, Riley, like, yes, you are a good person, and it's okay though that you fail sometimes. It's okay, because obviously no one's perfect, and that's okay. So it's like, yes, anxiety, I acknowledge you, but I've got this. So what lovely messages for kids and for adults. Honestly, it's wonderful. Like, yes, we can appreciate what anxiety tries to do for us, but then like we take back control and we know that we're stronger than that. We can rise above it, and you just keep moving forward, and you know that you're enough, that you're not alone. So what a beautiful movie. I absolutely loved it. So again, cheers to the wonderful, brilliant minds at Pixar. And with that, that's going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. Be sure to check out storytellingsaga.com, and as always, feel free to send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by emailing me at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Until next time, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.